How on earth do we have so many ridiculous situations going on right now in the United Kingdom? I have to be completely blunt, and here I can. We're here on Black Belt Barrister, off the record. Please do subscribe. Thank you all so much. How do we have so many ridiculous situations at the moment? Let me give you an example. Despite the fact that we now have a Supreme Court ruling, as if we ever needed one, to tell us that sex in the Equality Act refers to biological sex and not just what somebody decides that it should be and identify themselves into a different sex. Now, I have complete respect for those who have gender dysphoria, and it must be very difficult for them, but that is not to say that everyone else should go along with the same idea. The Supreme Court ruled, and I think it's ridiculous that it was necessary, but the Supreme Court ruled that sex in the Equality Act refers to biology. However, why do I then say that we have ridiculous situations in the UK? Well, we still have today, as it was brought up in Prime Minister's questions, we still have at least one prison that was named in Downview, which has 5 biologically male inmates in a women's prison who get to spend time with the other women unsupervised, and they get to wander around, putting all of those at risk. And I can say that with confidence because they're in prison. So it would not be defamatory to say that someone in prison might pose a risk to someone else in prison, because they're in prison. Whatever they're in prison for, there's some kind of risk, particularly if they are biological males in a women's prison. Now, to be fair, Keir Starmer said he will look into those issues and get an answer to them and see that the Member of Parliament asking the question gets a response to it. And hopefully she does, and hopefully that is sorted out. But we shouldn't be in this situation. This is patently absurd. And it's not an isolated incident. This is pervasive across the country, across organizations. We have companies and organizations saying they're not going to implement the Supreme Court ruling just yet, including the NHS, by the way. I've dealt with that on another video on my Black Belt Barrister channel. They say they are waiting for the EHRC to come up with some guidance on how they should follow the Supreme Court ruling, because they say it's unclear. Well, sex is based on biology. Woman means biological woman. Man means biological man. Women's spaces are for women. Men's spaces for men. Men's services are separated on sex. They therefore should be separated on the basis of sex. This is really not difficult. We had the story where Marks and Spencer's hit the press, and not just because of the cyber attack, but hit the press because a biological man was allegedly offering assistance to a young girl in fitting a bra. You don't need to be a lawyer, and you don't need a Supreme Court ruling to know that that is just not quite acceptable. It's just not right. And here we are. We have Police Scotland now. I saw earlier today that if a biological male person, and I'll change the wording so that it's not flagged in the algorithm. If a male person grapes a woman or a girl, and I don't mean that in disrespectfully to any of the victims in any sense, it is just to not trigger the algorithm, then they will be treated and recorded as male. And not least of which, that is to protect the integrity and the dignity of those victims, because to refer to a male grapist as a woman is frankly an insult to everybody. In my view, there should be no leniency. It is up there with the top offences, but it is not always sentenced as per many of the top offences. But in my view, there should be no leniency. It should be absolutely treated as the most serious offence against another person. Let me know in the comments what you think. Choose your words carefully, otherwise your comments get filtered by YouTube. It's the way that it does it. It's a family platform. That's what they do. It's not me deleting comments, by the way. YouTube does, and I respect YouTube. It's their platform. They do filter comments, but it's their comments to filter. But we have these utterly ridiculous situations going on. We have the highest unemployment rate since the pandemic because of the cost of employing people, and I suspect because we have the new employment rights coming in, and employers, unsurprisingly, are going to be much more risk averse in taking on a new employee if they can make complaints from day one, which is effectively what this does. And therefore they will be risk averse. They will think, let's stop and think, because if that person does sort of create some problems, we can't get rid of them, and they'll be able to make complaints from day one. Whereas they might otherwise have given someone a shot and think, well, you might be a little bit quirky, but let's give you a shot, see how we go. You get 6 months in, they are really causing people problems, perhaps. Then they might think, we're just not suited. We're just not suited. But that won't be the case moving forward. And that, coupled with the increase in cost of employing people, employer national insurance, which does cost the employee eventually, and therefore businesses will take on fewer employees because the costs are higher, etc. We have the highest unemployment rates since the pandemic. Don't say we didn't warn you. I certainly warned when they first released the budget. I knew all this was coming. Some people, I get sent comments. Bless the viewers who send these to me, are worried that I get upset about certain comments when they say, have you seen this comment? They're talking about you and they've said this or that. Bless them. It doesn't bother me in the slightest, but I do look at them now and again and I find it comical. One of the reasons I had been vocal about all of these issues is because I could see it coming, because they do not, with respect, where it's due, of course, they do not, most members, if not all the members of this cabinet and Labour, have not run businesses before. They don't have experience running businesses before. They are not as qualified in economics as they perhaps made out that they were. They know who we're talking about. And called out for not being qualified, not being suitable, etc. I just have had strong reservations that they have any clue what they're doing, and that they're not going to just destroy private schools, destroy businesses, etc. Open the floodgates to lots of different things, including illegal migration, including literally opening the floodgates of prisons when how many countless prisoners have been released now? And many of them mistakenly released. You've seen the spike for 2025. David Lammy said there was a spike in 2021. There was no spike in 2021. The spike is in 2025. And I'm going to move because my back is absolutely killing me. I am sitting on the sofa, but I'm in immense amounts of pain. But David Lammy said there was a spike in 2021. There was no spike in 21. It was 25 because of all these harebrained schemes of releasing prisoners early, and then they've released people by accident to say, oh, actually, no, sorry, we shouldn't have released you, but there's some of them are still on the run now. I mean, why would they come back? Some of them have handed themselves in. But this is just ridiculous, literally putting people, the members of the public, in danger by literally opening the floodgates of dangerous people and allowing them back on the streets when they should have been in prison. And I am beside myself as to how this system can continue in the form that it's in. It's utterly absurd. I'm rambling and I'm waffling, and I don't care, because this is off the record. This is what I really think, and I am absolutely staggered that this just hasn't collapsed and folded in on itself already. And then don't get me started with the BBC. We've had all sorts of comments about the BBC. Do I think we should still have the BBC around? Yes, I do. It has now had decades of scandals which shouldn't have happened, have clearly really tanked the reputation, to put it bluntly. We should still have, in my view, a national public broadcaster. It should be impeccable. It should be impartial. We should protect it, but it has to be cleaned out. It has to have all of these scandals properly dismantled and people held accountable. Wash out any of the extreme ideological protectionist views and controls that people have alleged are going on in the BBC. You see what I did there? That's what people are saying. Those are the allegations being made, particularly by the whistleblower and other people speaking out about the BBC. And you can hold those views based on what you see, read, hear. You can make your own minds up. I'm not telling you what to think, but it needs clearing out. If we're going to maintain a public broadcaster, it has to be factual. It needs to present the facts, not twist it, not shape it, as I heard someone put today, or read someone put. It needs to present those facts, not shape them, not twist them, not portray them in the way they want it. Like the BBC in its statement about the President Trump speech, the chair said they wanted to edit it in such a way that it portrayed how they say President Trump's supporters viewed and interpreted his speech. How many levels of subjective interpretation are there? Just play the speech unedited, or if it is edited, to put clips together, make sure it's clear, the time frames, the timestamps, with a swipe to edit. You know how they do a swipe? So from this to this, there's a swipe in between, and there might be an edit. It might be times apart. So you see this bit might be an hour later. It's not, but it might have been. So if that happened with the Trump speech, they should have made it clear. An hour later, he said this bit, not back to back, because that makes him say a different sentence. How could you possibly say that was justified? How could you possibly say that was accidental? How can anyone possibly say that anyone reviewing that, because someone would have reviewed it, even if not at the BBC? I don't believe for a minute the BBC just aired it and just stuck it on air without having reviewed it. But let's say that they did that, they're still liable because they should have reviewed it, because it's about President Trump the week before the presidential election. You'd think that they would have reviewed it and therefore are liable to it. Absolutely outrageous. And back to trans issues, we still have tribunals going on and cases going on arguing, for example, the Darlington nurses arguing over whether a male nurse, a biologically male nurse, should be changing in the female changing rooms, where all of the female nurses are expected to change down to their underwear to, and it sounds vulgar while I say it like this, but, and forgive me, I have to say it to really put this across. They are obviously and necessarily required to strip down to their underwear so that they can put scrubs on, because they're required to wear scrubs to work as their role. And therefore, if they're required to do that in the presence of a biologically male person, that is absolutely outrageous. We don't need cases and tribunals and decisions and deliberations and cross-examinations and cases and tribunals. We don't need all this to know that that is just absolutely unacceptable. Who finds that acceptable? I read yesterday, and I had to check that it wasn't a troll account or a parody account or something, but there was one parody account which I didn't fall for. I nearly fell for, but at first blush you would find it. But then there was a comment that said, if you've come to check the profile, then you've been trolled. So obviously a parody account. But some of this one that I'm talking about was not a parody account or a troll account, and it said changing rooms are not private spaces, and if they want them to be private, they can pay for separate ones. They, being women, can pay for separate women's changing spaces, this person said, in favor of men using women's spaces. And I can believe that, because there is, I'll just say, a professional. Some people know who I'm talking about, some people will not, and I won't name and shame, but there was a professional who said that it would be inappropriate to ask men, i.e. biological males identifying as women, to use a separate space instead of the women's space. And it would be more appropriate if the women using the women's space were uncomfortable with the biological male using the women's space, that those women should use the disabled space or another space. and genuinely said that that would be more appropriate. Now, I'm sorry, how on earth is that more appropriate? How on earth is it more appropriate to ask women to, if they're uncomfortable with the biological male in the women's spaces, that instead of using the women's space, they go and use the disabled space or another space? How on earth is that possibly appropriate? Staggering. Anyway, this is me coming off the back of a very long, tiring and difficult day and painful day, with some filming in the middle of the President Trump and BBC, and why I think you'll be made to pay for it. I'll link that below. Go and watch it. And thank you all so much, by the way, for hopping over to my friend's video. He's now got over 1,000 views on his first video. I am so pleased. And over 100 of you have subscribed. I am so pleased. For context and for comparison, my first video on April 27th, 2020, my first video on Black Belt Barrister, got 3 views in the first 24 hours. 3. And I think probably there was me, my wife, and probably me again an hour or two later. So probably no one saw my first video in the first 24 hours. That first video, I think it's about seatbelts or something, I think has still only got like 8,000 views since then. Now I'm so humbled and grateful that my average view within a few hours on Black Belt Barrister, average view count is around 100,000. I thank you all so much for watching for so long, for so many years, so many videos, thousands of videos, countless thousands of hours. I've enjoyed doing it. I will keep doing it. It's all thanks to you. These are your channels, your platform. Thank you so much. Have a good night. I'll see you soon.